Searching for the best way to protect passwords and privileged accounts? Thycotic empowers security and IT operation teams to discover, secure, and manage all types of privileged accounts with the fastest time to value of any privileged access management solution. Get up and running fast with solutions for privileged account discovery, turnkey installation, automation, auditing, and reporting tools with Thycotic's free 30-day trial. Thycotic, the fastest growing PAM provider in the market, available both on-premise and in the cloud. Get started today with a free Thycotic secret server trial at securityweekly.com/Thycotic. Today's connected world leaves no room for errors. Neustar reliably secures those connections. Neustar's cloud solutions, which include web application security, DDoS protection, DNS services, IP geolocation, and threat intelligence, ensure network availability across the globe. With over 20 years of award-winning security experience, Neustar proudly enables and protects digital assets of some of the world's largest enterprises. Find out how your company can benefit from the power of Neustar's trusted connection by visiting securityweekly.com/Neustar. Secure your world with Neustar. Always on, ultra secure. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you have a guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Complete that form. We review those suggestions on a regular basis. If you send me an email and ask to be on the show, especially if you're from a PR agency, likely I will ignore it. Jules Okafor is the CEO and founder of Revolution Cyber. She joins us today to shed light on what causes security technology rollouts to fail. Welcome, Jules, to the show.
Hello.
It is nice to have you. I've had my fair share, Jules, of security technology rollouts, some of which went really, really bad, and some went really, really good. I think we like to guess as to why. There's lots of reasons why, I think, for in each direction.
What would you say was the difference on your end as to why there was a difference in success versus failure?
I love it when the interviewee interviews me. It's great. I think that for me, like of all the ones that went bad, it's mostly because of communication and lack of teamwork with other teams. Like wholeheartedly.
Yes.
That was the number one for me.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, could it have gone bad consistently because you were involved?
Oh, because it's me. I mean, that's, yeah.
Ouch.
That is
Just
the common
checking.
denominator.
Just checking.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, well, in my experience, what we've seen with regard to technology is that often security and IT teams are not communicating prior to the rollout. Often we miss or take for granted that employees within organizations do not, they don't have the same motivation to take the action that security would want. So ultimately what we find is technology's rolled out. The IT team thinks it's a great thing, so many benefits, so much value. It's not communicated inside the organization. It's then rolled out without consideration for timing, for who's going to be using what features, and for reducing the amount of friction via a limited click experience.
Yeah. I think oftentimes the users are like, wait a minute, I used to be able to do that and now I can't. Who rolled that out? And the IT security is like, yes. Didn't you read my email? And it's like, no one reads those emails.
No one. Literally no one. And to be honest, the emails tend to be very short and succinct, but they don't convince people or influence them to take action. So a lot of times it's like, it's another IT email. It's another security email. Why would I even do this? I'm just going to, push it to the side until they're confronted with it, and then they have to deal with it. And that's just a normal human behavior, but I don't think we've developed a way around it quite yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Adrian and I see that when we, ask the host for stuff as an example. And I'm like, well, we can start with sending people an email. I'm like, but realize that everyone's busy. An email isn't necessarily the best way to communicate it. So I'm like, we need to do a Slack message. We need to talk about it in a meeting. We need to schedule like 2 different meetings at 2 different times because we have people in different time zones. And I've learned the hard way over time that those are better ways to communicate. Do you have also other tips in that arena, Jules?
Yeah, so I believe it's about socializing the idea of the rollout. What we find with regard to adoption and retention is that the people who you want to roll out to first in via a pilot program or a sort of a committee, those are the people who are influencers and have the ability to convince other people to do the work. In addition, it should be adopted by a group that would leverage it the most and would be more than willing to have the inconvenience of things going wrong. So I think a lot of times what you want to do is establish the people who are influential, who would benefit the most, and who want to act as either champions or ambassadors who can socialize for you in addition to anything you're doing via email, Slack, or any other social communication.
Yeah, so like rolling something out new to the sales team at the end of the quarter is probably a bad idea.
Don't do that. I'm previously SVP of sales and marketing, and whenever that would happen, and my computer would shut down as a contract was coming through, I would literally go crazy. But that means that security has to have a fundamental understanding of what the business is, what the revenue drivers are, and where they need to make the impact across the year. So it can't just be, we're going to just roll this out. I know it seems simple, endpoint, but usually things go badly, and you don't want them to go bad and really impact revenue.
I mean, it's really, I often say patching is the most disruptive thing you can do to a production environment, and rolling out new security tools is really not, anything that changes the workflow or behavior, has a potential to directly impact the user's ability to go through that workflow. Yeah, is basically like a patch.
And literally, like let's talk patching. So that is one of the areas we see all the time where there is a natural tension between security and IT, because IT is really, they tend to be more closely working towards driving new technology, driving new initiatives. And patching is designed to stop that, at least for a period of time. So where security can actually partner with IT is really in having the conversations about when's the best time to roll out a patch. What is the worst thing that could happen if things went down? What are the systems that you want to make sure definitely are not impacted? And put together a phased roadmap with regard to when the patches will be rolled out. I've been sitting on site and seen hundreds of thousands of patches that have just not been our systems have not been patched. And there's like hundreds of thousands of exceptions. We just were unable to get it done, or it would have taken the system down. It's a legacy system, and yet there's no further conversation. It's really, that's where it stops. So I think it's really important with regard to adoption of patches, of new vulnerability management tech, of SIM, that there be the conversations prior, and I like to call that, unfortunately, the propaganda, where you're going in and you're really trying to convince people and persuade people that what you want them to do is good. And then you're telling them why it's good and then how you're going to help them. That's important prior to any major initiative and any technology rollout.
So at the risk of sending us down a rabbit hole, do you think a strong change control process helps or more hinders with that kind of thing? Since you're required to have like a rollback and...
I haven't seen strong change control procedures in of themselves help. It actually is the culture in which the change control procedure operates. Because quite literally, the business is always going to do what it's incentivized to do. And so if a change will impact the business or the revenue, it won't happen regardless of the procedure. Someone from the top will come down and say, we're making an exception, don't do anything. Or what you'll typically find is people will skirt that procedure. So it's got to be that whatever change control process you put in place is also aligned with the way in which the culture of the organization actually works. And you'll find that'll be more effective then. But you can't do that in the middle of a major change. It needs to be established well before.
So that's
a keystone,
question.
The culture.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Yes, the culture.
Go ahead, Tyler.
That's all good. It's sometimes hard over Zoom. I'm a data nerd, always have been a data nerd. Is there any particular recommendations when doing a rollout with regards to the metrics you keep, the data you track, and how you communicate the successes, failures of those metrics upward, downward, outward?
Mm-hmm. So what we like to do is, and I would say it's not, with regard to KPIs, of course, your adoption rate is the number of new users over the total number of users. That's like a basic user adoption rate. But I think more importantly, what you want to figure out are behavioral metrics. So For instance, how many people, one, opened your email? How many people actually read what it is you sent? Let's just talk patching. If it's patching, how many patches were applied? How many of them were not applied for X reason? How many were given exceptions? If there's a change control procedure, you can actually say, what phase did each patch get through? And then you can sort of mark by phase exactly how many of the patches made it through what phase. So you can go back and measure, why is it at this phase we keep having breakdowns? If you can also think about engagement metrics. So I like to talk about a roadmap. Typically for a rollout of like SSO, something like Okta, it tends to be a 12 to 18 month engagement that is typically fit into a 6 month window. And if you're going to do the 6 months, the first thing you want to do is isolate your I call it your win group. So who's that initial group you're going to roll out to for the positive case study that you can use then to share throughout the organization. Prior to that, so prior to the communication going to the win group, you want to at least start thinking 3 months ahead. So what's the launch date for the technology rollout? And 3 months before that is when you start your first communication about the fact that it's coming. You want to have something every month in a different channel that reminds people that what you're asking them to do is coming, because you're going to assume people won't check their email. You're going to assume certain people at certain times will be on social, so on Slack, on Teams or whatever. And then you want to have maybe a department leader who actually then sends a more targeted communication out to that win group. What you also want to have is in your broader forums, so in your department level meetings, in your company-wide strategy sessions, in your security team one-on-ones with business leaders, I'm hoping you see folks are doing that. You want to tell them that this is coming down the road and you need their support in order to make sure it happens. And why? You want to have materials ready, one message strong with a motto or a slogan, just to get people amplified and something they can easily remember. And then you want to have that same message be distributed beyond that win group once you've tested it into the organization at least 30 to 45 days, and then you do the next rollout to the broader organization. By business impact, right? The person who would impact most from the technology, and then by the highest risk groups.
Got it. Yeah. And kind of how you bundle that all together is extremely important, right? You really can't miss any piece of it from a communication perspective, or things start to fall apart. It's about a holistic approach and catching all of the components in that.
It is. And I'll say, even if you've started in a place and it hasn't gone well, there are really low adoption rates for password managers in organizations, for VPN use, and for secure file sharing. With those particular things, knowing that people don't want to adopt them, you're going to have to make sure that you have a community or a page that's dedicated to where people can get information, and you've got to keep directing people there for additional information. You also have to have help desk as a part of it. If someone calls about their password reset, you have help desk give them the update about the fact that, we've got this new password manager. It can be helpful. So you really have to have the communication happening at all facets. And it's about everywhere the user would interact with another member of the security team or asking for help. That's where you introduce the potential information you think they need.
Jules, I've always been a big fan of reducing my technical debt with respects to patching and updating. And you gave a great example where we see a lot of organizations that there's 100,000 patches. They're just hanging out there. I'm like, well, I truly believe, and I worked in vulnerability management for some time, and I think this is really where that stems from, is that regardless of criticality, regardless of scheduling, like, just keep a good cadence of keeping up with your patches, so that when an Exchange patch comes out, I'm not going, well, yeah, I've got to like update my Exchange from version 1 to version 2 to version 3, then apply 16 patches before I can apply the hot fix because I've incurred all that technical debt. My question is, like, how do we communicate that to the users and make them give visibility to Tyler's point about metrics to say, hey, we as IT and security, we're doing this. There might be some disruptions, but we're doing this to reduce our technical debt and make an easier time for us to keep moving forward at all times.
I'll be honest. Part of my job is to really sit between security and the rest of the organization. And the head of marketing, let me see, where you see the most patching, like is in CRM, marketing too. They tend to have a lot of SaaS and other things. And then with regard to the business functions, like and anything that is like product related, in those spaces, I tend to find that there is a difference in language between how security speaks and how that particular group speaks. So the idea of technical debt is important to security, but not important to the business or the user.
Agreed.
So what you have to talk about to them is like for instance, procurement. They want to save money. It's a consolidation of vendors. With regard to, if you're talking to legal, it's reduction of liability, right? So you have to translate what you're asking them to do into the language that they understand and that is important to them. Otherwise, they don't care about your technical debt. It just doesn't matter to them.
Right. They have no idea what that is. I agree. That's a great point.
No, none.
Right. Or they're like, we hear you, but please stay out of our way. Don't screw our stuff up when we, like, you're keeping us from getting stuff done. Like, that's your department to us.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, once you get really far behind with patches, I think the strategy is from here now forward versus going all the way back. Because to be honest, nobody wants to revisit and go and wade through the hundreds of thousands we've missed in years before. What you need to do is say, at this point, I'm looking to adopt a strategy for any future patching coming. And it may impact old patches, but we're going to start with the next one coming. This is how I would like us to work together to get that done. And if it does impact the previous patch, or we've got to patch a previous hole before we can patch this one, then we'll have to come up with a plan as we go. So I think a lot of times there's this need to but we've got all these other things, like the security team says, we've got all these other patches. Now that we're doing this one, let's do all the hundreds of thousands. And they're like, no. So you've got to minimize the amount of perceived work. It is. Yeah, and that's all psychological.
And oftentimes, Jules, I like that. You're just like, look, we're just so far behind. We're just going to do something new. And by the way, here's why all that debt we had in the past was really bad. So, like, let's not do that again. And we implement this new thing. Like, there's going to be a patch every week. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we can do it every week, then we don't have the backup, right? So you kind of get them. It's the hygiene thing. And even if like you're going to a doctor, you're looking to improve your health, you already had all the steaks and all the beers and all the
cigars.
Stuff in the past. Now we've got a future looking plan, but it will impact what you've done in the past. So there's a benefit to you to doing this. And if you can just eat less in a week, less calories, you can actually do it in a normal and less painful way than if you wait until you need to be, a swimsuit model. And then, I'm not sure how to help you.
Yeah,
there are really easy ways to create analogies around what you're asking them to do so that they get it.
Yeah, fasting in the carnivore diet is not. I didn't know that was a diet. I didn't realize I was on it until someone said it was actually like a dieting thing. Like, what do you mean? I skip breakfast and lunch and then I eat a big steak for dinner. I'm like, oh, I'm on the carnivore diet. This is awesome.
That works.
You're trendy. You
is that? Yeah, but keto is Atkins, and it's also complicated. But ultimately, if you think about the diet industry. It is all about marketing. Security doesn't do marketing well. That's where the struggle is. User adoption is impacted by a lack of focus on marketing, communications, and what I like to call cyber diplomacy. So you've got to go out.
I like that.
Shake hands, meet the people. I like to call it, when you first become a CISO or when there's a new leadership change, you do your listening tour. So you're going in, you're listening to what their issues are. And then the next step, which isn't happening, you weave that into what your initiative roadmap is. You don't just take it and just kind of sit with it. You weave it in, and then you go back and say, look, I heard what you said. This is how we're going to, this Okta rollout, I am not in partnership with Okta and do not recommend them explicitly. But essentially, any product that you're rolling out, you go back and say, we delivered this with you in mind, and here's how it's going to roll out. So we need you to help us. Because they feel like they were a part of it, they will then take it more seriously than if you're just imparting it on them.
No, you're right, because I think we talk about, I like your term, cyber diplomacy. We'll build those relationships and we'll hear what they're saying, but we're really not listening. We're like, we're still just going to roll out Okta as an example. And whatever, but hey, remember we had lunch and had beers? That was fun, right?
Exactly. We should do it again. But it's not built into the work at all. They're completely kept separately.
It's a great point.
So if we could use this and pivot back onto culture a little bit more, because we talked about how that's a keystone. It's number one in the description here. How do you handle companies? I feel like I've run into a lot that think they have a strong security culture, but they kind of have a misunderstanding of what that means. When they think a strong security culture, they're talking about, we force all these security measures on them. Like they can't go to the bathroom without permission. Like we got them locked down, basically. And I'm like, so you make your employees miserable and you feel like that's awesome security culture? How do you handle that though? How do you, and do you partner with group therapists, and how does that change your rate?
So what I'll say is, more often than not, people think a strong sense of security is that we everything's locked down. People can't do things without us seeing, and that is one way to enforce security. But it really is enforcement. The difference in a strong security culture is that the security team actually has to do less work because the organization's doing the work for them. So it really is about when you have a strong security culture, the conversations in the organization almost always come up and tie to security. So people already know what the ties are. You don't have to keep explaining it. The other thing that you'll find is that the users are coming to you more frequently to report. So your incident reporting numbers should be really high because things are happening and people don't know, and they're coming to you to tell you. A lot of times, if you're doing a strong culture of security, your inbox is empty and you think, if there's no problem, if I can't see it, it's not a problem, except all the problems are happening and no one wants to tell you anything. So I'm ultimately asking people with regard to a culture of security, it's got to be an experience. People have to be able to feel like the more security, the more productive they are in their job. If those two aren't tied, you'll find that it becomes a weird friction and people will choose not to follow security rules. You also will see that security believes itself to be an extension of the business and not the other way around. So it doesn't operate in of itself. It really is a shared service, delivering services to the organization, similar to IT does, similar to procurement does. And it really only works if it's gotten the buy-in at the top. It's also been fed through the different units. And you're also seeing people say, can you give me information to share in my conversations internally? Or we've got this new project coming up. We'd love to know how we can ensure it's safe. That's how you know you have a strong sense of security. Absolutely.
And I want to get your take on one of the most horrifying security culture things I've heard in the last couple of years. Just your hot take on this, and maybe it's just me, but I've been hearing more and more about security awareness testing resulting in punitive measures against employees, like people, like their pay getting docked if they open phishing emails during phishing emails, people even getting fired if they open too many of those phishing emails. That was shocking to me. I don't know if that's shocking to everyone else, but
no,
that seems like it's
why?
Way overreaction to me. I guess I feel like it shouldn't be our goal to train every employee to be an expert at finding a phishing email when their job is accounting.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. But most companies don't see it that way. They're called corrective action plans, CAPs. And you find those typically in highly restricted, high compliance industries, typically banking, healthcare, and ones in like tech. Because of the fact that they're so visible to regulators, they need immediate behavior change, and they feel like the negative will be faster than positive. So a lot of times with those, and I've sat in on companies that were trying to build those out, there is a process by which you have to go through and a certain number of times and chances you get. And there's a communication that's required before action can be taken. But it's all done through legal, HR, and then the security team. It does not involve any discussions with the user. It typically doesn't involve any feedback. And phishing is such a bad way to tell whether someone takes security seriously, because it literally is designed to trick you. And it's almost like, okay, was the phishing email really, really good, or was I really bad? And if it was really good, should I be fired because the phishing email was really good and it tricked me? But what you'll find is it's not just you failed, you're fired. There tends to be a communications and a ramp up to it. And then there tends to be a policy created and then a notification that goes out. Typically, you have 3 strikes and you're out before you're fired due to a phishing email and awareness.
And I mean, so my pure emotional reaction, to hearing about this is, well, what about the Mimecast or Proofpoint administrator? What corrective action do they get?
Oh.
What about my, they let it get to my inbox in the first place. Like, don't they have some responsibility here?
Well, and you could end up developing bad behavior too, where no one opens any email and clicks any link because they don't want to get fired.
And that's bad. That's why they're not reading your emails about the Okta rollout.
See, and quite literally, I mean, that's the thing when you're creating policies, you have to make sure you actually take into consideration the unintended consequences of a policy. So if your corrective action plan says, if you click on a fish 3 times, you're fired. Okay, well, I'm going to take, you have to check your email typically, but what they'll do is they'll be very careful which ones they open, which reduces productivity for the organization. Like, for instance, I'm sure you all heard about at the end of the year, there were phishing emails going out about bonuses, and people weren't getting bonuses, but everybody opened the email. It almost had a 90% open rate. So that's my point. If it's designed in that way and people do take the action, I don't know that we should be punishing them. I think we should reward those who haven't clicked on anything. But it may be that they're not clicking on anything because they're not actually doing their job. Maybe they're out surfing. But it also means that the culture tends to be very, can be toxic, or it can be very competitive. And so that would be something that would completely be in line with everything else you're seeing in the organization. Like some of the biggest things, they have those kinds of programs in place.
Great stuff, Jules. I love the discussion. If I'm rolling out some security technology, you're going to be getting a call from me. I want you on my team. Awesome stuff, Jules. Thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back with the Enterprise Security News with nudes, something like that. We're going to talk about Grim launching a private vulnerability disclosure program coming up next. Stay tuned.